Okay, let's get into this really powerful book by Cecile Soman. Now, this isn't about predicting the future with some kind of crystal ball. Not at all. It's about breaking down foresight into a discipline, a structured way of thinking that, really, anyone can learn to get a handle on what's coming next.
So let's start with a question we can all relate to, right? Why do we get caught so off guard by the future so often? Well, according to Cecile Soman, the problem isn't that we lack imagination. The problem is actually biological. Brain scans show that we use the very same parts of our brain to remember the past as we do to imagine the future. Think about that. We're trying to build a picture of tomorrow using only the building blocks of yesterday.
And this little neurological quirk creates something she calls the permanent present. It's basically our brain's default setting. It's this deep bias to just assume that the future is going to be a slightly different version of today. It gives us a sense of stability, sure, but it also makes us incredibly blind to the real game-changing shifts. It's not a personal flaw, it's just our standard operating system.
And that brings us to the book's most powerful idea. If our own brain's hardwiring is the problem, well, the solution is to build a better process to override it. Soman lays out this fantastic framework to deliberately short-circuit that permanent present bias, turning foresight from some vague, mystical art into a practical, repeatable skill.
So, the first part of this whole discipline is all about analysis. It's about learning to see the bigger system at play. Because before you can create anything new, you have to understand the fundamental forces that are shaping the world you're in. She calls this first step know. The book makes this huge claim that all societal change, no matter how complicated it looks on the surface, is really driven by the interplay of just 4 deep forces. First, you've got resources, things like energy, water, raw materials. Then there's technology, all the tools we invent. Demographics, the shifting face of human populations. And finally, governance, the rules and systems we create to manage ourselves. These are not trends, they're the deep currents flowing way beneath the waves.
And this right here is the key difference between just reacting and truly strategizing. Chasing a trend like remote work, that's just reacting to a symptom you see on the surface. But understanding it as the result of these converging forces, technology giving us connectivity, shifting demographics demanding flexibility, and corporate governance evolving to allow it, that lets you see where things are actually headed in the long run.
Okay, so once you can see the system, how in the world do you come up with genuinely new ideas? That brings us to part 2, which Soman calls new. This is all about moving from analysis to actual creation.
Now, this is not your typical chaotic brainstorming session. No way. Soman presents a very disciplined process that's actually based on how our brains work. It follows this specific rhythm: left, right, left. First, use your analytical left brain to sharply define the problem, all the research, the data, the constraints. Then, and this is crucial, you intentionally switch to your associative right brain. This is the discover phase. Unstructured sensory play, mind mapping, looking at art, anything to generate connections your logical brain would have missed. Finally, you shift back to the strategic left brain to distill all those wild ideas into a coherent strategy.
This quote from Carl Jung just nails the reason that middle discover phase is so important. Purely analytical thinking can only ever optimize what's already there. Real, true creation comes from that playful, non-linear exploration. It allows our brains to make those unexpected leaps. It's disciplined play.
This creative process is incredibly powerful, but it needs a North Star, a direction. The book argues that before you could even begin to think about strategy, there are a couple of foundational questions you absolutely have to answer. And this first one, it's the most important. And there's your answer. So often we think strategy is about asking, where are we going? But great strategy, according to Soman, is about the roots, defining who are we. Before any plan can be effective, it has to be anchored in a really deep, authentic understanding of identity. Any organization that's just focused on the branches without knowing its roots, well, it's building on sand. Authentic purpose is the only stable foundation.
So you have the analytical tools, you have a creative process, but let's be real. How do you actually make this a reality in a busy organization that's always demanding short-term results? This is the final, practical piece of the puzzle, the do.
The book's answer for making this all happen is just brilliantly simple. It's so pragmatic. It all comes down to this one number.
It's called the 5% rule. Don't try to change the whole organization overnight. Instead, just carve out and fiercely protect 5% of your resources, your team's time, your budget for this disciplined, future-focused work. It's what makes foresight manageable,
defensible, and actually sustainable over the long haul.
And here's where you can see how it all locks together into this complete reinforcing system. You analyze the world with the 4 forces, that's the know. You generate identity-driven ideas with that left-right-left creative engine, that's the new. And you make it a sustainable habit with the 5% rule, that's the do. Each part feeds and enables the others. It's a full loop.
So why does this matter so much, especially right now? Well, because we live in a world that's defined by constant change and disruption. Operating in that permanent present mode isn't just a blind spot anymore, it's a critical vulnerability. This framework is a practical antidote. It's about building the capacity for resilience, not just efficiency.
So what's the real shift, the ultimate takeaway? After you put this kind of discipline into practice, how does your view of the world and your own decision-making actually change on a daily basis?
Ultimately, your entire perspective flips. You move from just chasing the symptoms on the surface to analyzing the deep system underneath. You anchor your actions in a stable identity, not just in fleeting opportunities. And you stop seeing time spent thinking about the future as some kind of luxury or a cost, and you start seeing it for what it truly is, the single most vital investment you can make in building a resilient and purposeful future.